This is our website. You can see anything in blue here is a link that'll take you to somewhere else. You can see some of our research that's there, our big field day that we try to hold every year. You can link to that and some of the stuff that we do there. The big blue and green H that you see right here, again, if you click on that link, that will take you to the KDA website. So, and if you go to their website, you can get back to ours. So we work very closely with them. I've got 3 pictures right now I want to show you. This was from our first field day in 2014. And you can see some folks there that would have an interest in hemp. Maybe something else, I don't know, but definitely hemp. And then we had folks like this. Again, here's a picture of Dr. Williams, some of our state legislatures. There's Tom Hutchins, Dr. Jimmy Henning is there. And so a lot of professionals, legislators were there, you know, wanting to learn more about this crop and have a viable interest in how this crop progresses in the state of Kentucky. And then you also have these folks there. You have Dr. Nancy Cox, who's the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. You have Dr. Eli Capilouto, who's the President of the University of Kentucky. You have, again, Dr. Williams. You may have heard of this guy right here, Senator Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader. And then Commissioner of Agriculture Jamie Comer, who's now a congressman. So again, I show you those 3 pictures to tell you that in all my years at the university and years prior to being at the university, I've never seen a more encompassing crop, a more across the board interest in a crop than with this crop right here. Okay, so it runs the gamut, all right? And so this is, there's a lot of interest in this crop, and by your attendance here today, the attendance we've had at our other meetings, what we see at the county levels and so forth, I don't see it waning anytime soon. Now, we have lots of great successes in growing industrial hemp in Kentucky, okay? We're very good at that. We also have some failures in growing industrial hemp in Kentucky. And a lot of times we're somewhere in between when we look at this crop. I won't go over a lot of this, but for some of you that aren't involved with it, hemp has been around for thousands and thousands of years, okay? The literature takes it back, we can see it 12, 13,000 years back and so forth. A main textile fiber, if we look early production in the United States, fiber was primarily what it was grown for. And if you look back to World War II and those kind of things, fiber is what we were looking to grow hemp for. Now, when this program started, and Brent told you about, you know, the bill here in Kentucky in 2013, then the National Farm Bill 2014, when that came around, most people thought and anticipated that indeed hemp fiber and hemp grain would be the primary goal or the production efforts that would be made for industrial hemp. But as you saw from his slide, over 60% of the crop here in Kentucky in 2016 was earmarked for CBDs. It's a plant you have to plant every year, okay? It's not a perennial. It can be dioecious or monoecious. In other words, you can either have male and female plants, or you can have male and female parts on the same plant. It depends on the variety, okay? Very strongly photosensitive. When you plant this, is going to make all the difference in the world as to the type of production you get, okay? And I caution you and say that because, again, we've been researching these other crops forever and ever. We're just in our 3rd year of research on industrial hemp. So we've got a tremendous amount of stuff to learn. Now, again, we talked about the 3 main components, fiber, grain, and then the phytocannabinoids or the CBDs. I wanted to put on there +1 because I want to talk a little bit about forage. Dr. Williams, you may have heard him say this, but you can see some industrial hemp being grown right here. You can see some corn as the border, and you'll see some more pictures of this during the presentation. But Dr. Williams told me he was giving this presentation much like we are today, and he was kind of walking across the front of the room just like I am right now. He was talking about this, and he said, you'll see that when we have our industrial hemp, he said, we put our borders in corn and all, and 3 guys at a table like this kind of under their breath said, they hide theirs with corn too. So we try to hide it, but we use that for corn. This was talked a little bit earlier about the Bast and hurd fibers. When we're looking at fiber, these are the 2 main components that we're looking at. Tremendous opportunity for end uses for these materials. It would take us all day to look at the individual uses, and you'll see some of this in Dr. Riddle's presentation, but the outer part of it is this long stringy fiber that might be used to make clothing, that might be used to make rope or anything like that. And then this inner woody fiber is called the hurd, and it can be used for a plethora of different things. Building materials, hempcrete, those kind of things, different fabrics. Again, Dr. Riddle talked about that. Animal bedding. Happened to be in Australia 3 years ago, and they were packaging hurd in plastic bags, much like you would see pine shavings for horse bedding. They were using industrial hemp. So lots of opportunities for those type of things. If you're going to grow it for fiber, variety selection is key. Now you're going to see that for everything we talk about. We're talking about grain, we're talking about fiber, we're talking about cannabinoids. That's not going to change, okay? This is not going to change. That's going to be for all, whenever we're growing this plant, these are going to be key components right here. Now, not too much fertilizer, because we're not looking for the grain in the fiber, we're just looking for that stalk, okay? And then we want to get our planting widths right, we want to get our planting spacing right within the row. So lots of things that we want to work at, but we don't want to get too much fertilizer, okay? We're still learning. I've got a slide that'll talk a little bit more about that, but we just want to be careful on there. How many of you have heard of redding? Okay, some of you, obviously they're growing. Redding is the key when we're looking at fiber, okay? Many of you in this room are familiar with making hay. All right, when we make hay, we go out, we get that good window of weather, we cut that hay down, and our number one goal is to get that hay up just as soon as we can, get it off that field before it gets rained on, okay? Just the opposite with this, all right? We want to leave it out there. We want it to get rained on. We want that moisture and the temperature change and all like that to break down some of that fiber and so forth. So we've got a long way to go on this, right? It says we don't know how to ret hemp, yes, but we're learning fast. And we're doing some stuff actually in the laboratory. Patrick Perry's here with us today. Patrick works for Kentucky Tobacco Research and Development, and he's working on that, doing a lot of research there. So we've got a lot to learn in that regard, but that is going to be a very, very key thing that we have to deal with. Looking at fiber yields, what are some of our potentials? Again, you can see this is pounds of yield per acre. These are the varieties over here. This is a variety called Futura, which a lot of people use for fiber and or maybe dual purpose. Bialo is one, and then you see a variety here called Witten. And you can see that as the growing season goes along, Witten keeps going up and up. These other two varieties kind of level off after a period of time. And so you say, well, Tom, I might want to use this one here. Only problem with that is it's not hemp. It's canaf, okay? And so when we're talking about fiber, we're talking about industrial hemp, and that has great promise for fiber, but so does canaf, and Dr. Riddle will talk more about that later on. But we're looking at both hemp, industrial hemp, and canaf as fiber, okay? So we've kind of got a dual purpose thing going on there. Packaging, just like with hay, is very important. We've got some mid-sized square bales here. This was actually 2015 work. This is our Woodford County farm. Again, you can see this is material that has been left out in the field for quite a while, has been redded, and we put it in big bales. Again, if we had more time today, we might discuss some of the opportunities in the packaging, but we don't. We'll just leave it at that. We'll move to grain. Again, here you go with that variety selection again, latitude and so forth, very important. Shorter stature for harvest. Again, if you think about that fiber, you want something that's really tall, you want to get a lot of yield, something 10, 12, 14 foot tall. But for grain, we don't have many combines that'll harvest something that's that tall, okay? So we'd like something a little shorter in stature, something that we can maybe use some equipment that we have available to us right now. Again, you can see some of the different lines, you know, some of the monoecious lines are important there. Planting date, very important, as we talked about. More fertilizer, pretty much like corn. We heard the comment made a while ago about soil testing and all like that. If you're going to grow this crop for production, like you would corn or soybeans, then what's the very first thing you would do if you're going to grow any kind of crop that you're going to look for a lot of production on? You're going to take a soil sample, all right? You want to make sure your P and K is right. You want to make sure your pH is right. No different here, okay? You want to get that soil test, and then you want to add more fertilizer. How much fertilizer? We're still learning. But if you're growing corn, for instance, you're probably putting on, what, 200 units of nitrogen for corn, somewhere in that neighborhood. We don't think we're quite there with hemp grain. We're probably somewhere between 125 and 150 pounds of nitrogen, but suffice it to say we're going to do more than we would with fiber, all right? We do have the opportunity for some dual purpose crops where we actually get the fiber and the grain. We can do that. If you're going to try to do that, then know that you're going to have to be the very best manager possible. If you're doing just fiber, just grain, or just cannabinoids, you got to get all the I's dotted and T's crossed. But if you're going to try to do a dual purpose crop, you got to multiply that by a factor of 10 or 12, okay? So very, very important to do that. Hay, baleage, and silage, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So what can we use that grain for? Animal or food consumption. We can't sell it for animal feed right now. I think that will come down the road. Again, Tom Hutchins with the tallow is going to show us some of the stuff that they've got. My wife and I were out over the weekend. We stopped at a store there in Lexington. We saw a bag of ground up hemp flour that said hemp protein. You can get hemp hearts. We're going to have hemp dogs for lunch today. So ton of stuff out there. And then Tom's probably going to touch with you a little bit on certified seed. And up until this year, everything's been planted in Kentucky as seed that has come from outside of the United States. I'm hoping we're going to plant some seed that was produced in Kentucky this year. Yeah. Okay. So Tom will tell us a little bit about that later on. This is some of our 2015 data. We're still crunching our 2016 data. We're not sure how that's going to turn out, but we know 2015. These are the different varieties of hemp. For grain, we got about 1,000 pounds of grain per acre. On this, you can see we did not a lot of difference except for this one variety right here. So if we only had 4 varieties that were available to us and we're looking for grain production, we'd probably look at this one right here, okay? But how many different varieties did Brent say we planted last year? 55? I've got 4 here, okay? So it was also mentioned that no herbicides, pesticides of any kind, so no herbicides, no insecticides, no fungicides, anything like that are available on hemp. But because we're a university, we have the opportunity to do some of this work, even though we can't publicize it or anything like that. But if these things do become available, we'll have some of this work in our back pocket that we can get out there rather quickly. Now, again, this is pounds of grain yield per acre. Again, you see that 1,000-pound mark. Kind of go across there. You see, if we put this product on our hemp to control weeds, then we don't see much reduction in yield. But if we put this one on or we put this one on, we're going to see a big reduction in yield. So I just show that to you to say this is some of the work we're doing behind the scenes, not available right now, but has an opportunity to help us in the future. Again, some of the grain production there. You can see that. Okay, talked about fiber, we talked about grain. What about phytocannabinoids? How many of you have heard of Charlotte's Web? Okay, a lot of people. Good, good, good. So very important. This young girl right here, again, I don't have time to go into the whole story, but was having lots and lots of seizures, and parents were very interested in some medical marijuana and some CBDs and those kind of things, and so they tried that, and this is a broad term for many, many different chemical compounds that can be derived from these female flower plants on this industrial hemp. Same with marijuana, okay? Again, these, I'm not a chemist, don't profess to be. You can see the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, I cannot say that word, but THC. But again, you can see that these break down, and if you remove one carbon here or you add an oxygen there, those kind of things, you can manipulate a lot of these things, okay? So suffice it to say, tremendous amount of opportunity there. Only interested in the female flower buds. Again, if we're going to plant for cannabinoid production only, here's our same old things: variety selection, planting methods, fertility, harvesting, and all like that. So while we're looking at different products that we're harvesting for, our production methods, we're still looking at a lot of the same things, okay? This is a picture that was taken in Clark County, some of the hand harvesting of the female flower buds for cannabinoid production. The money, Brent talked a little bit about that. Nobody knows, okay? He showed you some money for both fiber and grain. I think those are fairly realistic numbers. There are no realistic numbers for female flower buds right now. That's between you and your processor and what you can work out. I don't think anybody knows that. We've talked about some of the basic agronomy. You want to plant this on the same land you'd plant tobacco or corn or soybeans, okay? This is not for marginal land. This is not for the back 40. This is for something that you're going to take care of and do that. Good soil moisture, good drainage. This crop does not like wet feet. If it's going to sit in water for a day or two, you might as well just write it off because it's going to die, all right? It does not like wet feet at all. Plant relatively shallow. This is probably the most important thing on this whole slide. Because we have no herbicides and so forth on this, we want to plant a 1/4 inch deep, okay, and no deeper. And when we drill down through there, we want to be able to see a little bit of that seed on top of the soil if at all possible, okay? And you say, well, Tom, you know, that hemp seed's pretty good size. If I get it a little deeper, will it be a problem? Well, no, it's probably not going to be a problem. It'll probably come up because there's a lot of oil in that seed, a lot of carbohydrates to get that shoot up out of the ground. But if you plant it 1 inch deep versus 1/4 inch deep, that seed that's placed right here has got to put up that shoot, and it's got to travel all the way up through there till it gets to that sunlight, all right? And in between that inch and that soil surface, are there any weed seeds in there? Thousands of weed seeds between that inch, all right? So when that moisture comes and these seeds start to develop, what's going to get to the soil surface first? Those weed seeds. Can you spray those weeds? Nope. So what do you want to plant? Shallow, okay? So very, very important there. Again, we talked about the inputs and being equal to that. I'm not going to go through all these. You can look through them. But what I wanted to talk to you about is that when you think of the University of Kentucky, and especially the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, I'm here as an agronomist talking to you about the agronomic principles, but we're looking at many, many different things on many different fronts here. You know, from ag engineering, we've got ag econ here. Dr. Snell's with us today. We're looking at it from a whole multifaceted approach within the college, okay? So it's not just the plants growing out in the field. We've got a tremendous amount of work going on within the college, and again, I'm not going to read through all those. You can look at them. The handout was out there. You're more than welcome to get a copy of that and see that. Again, this just focuses a little bit more on the 2016. You can see some of our forage baling there. We did that there at Spin on Top, our forage preference demonstration. Nick Carter, county agent in Fayette County, helped us with that. Certainly appreciative of Nick. I told you you'd see some more slides. You can see our corn borders. This was a study where we looked at canaf, hemp, and flax, okay? So just, again, that's kind of was in full production. Again, we were trying to hide it with our corn, all right? So we won't go through all these because we're going to run out of time, but again, this is grain per acre. So this right here is grain per acre. Here are the different varieties, okay? Plants per acre, all right? And then dry matter, pounds of dry matter per acre. So again, you can see that it does vary quite a little bit from the agronomic side. This seed's very high in oil, omega-3, omega-6s. Again, you can see the breakdown on some of here are the varieties across the bottom. Well, I won't go into this so much, but you can see that the biggest part of it in the green bar here is omega-6 and the omega-3s. My cardiologist tells me those are good for me, okay? So very excited about what this opportunity is and so forth. Just as a percentage of oil, again, you look at the different varieties, but anywhere between about 27, 28 to over 30% oil in these seeds. So very, very high in oil. If you're looking for a dove hunt later on, go ahead and plant some hemp because it'll outdo sunflower seeds and anything else. Birds really love it. Again, just some more data there, canopy closure. Very, very important to get that canopy closed up again because we can't use any herbicides, plant height and that type of thing. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over that. Again, just to reiterate, that we have a multifaceted approach within the college, and also working with other universities and land grant institutions, which brings a lot of synergy, which we're excited about. Genetic manipulation and so forth. I'm not talking about GMOs now, I'm talking about plant breeding, all right? So don't anybody think about GMOs yet, let's just think about plant breeding. But when we think about crops that we've been working on for years, like corn and soybeans, when you drive down the highway, when you leave here today, well, of course you can't do it today, but this fall, do it this fall. But if you see a corn crop, when you drive down the highway, every stalk of corn is the same height, okay? Beans, if that field is level, they're all the same height, all right? And if you look on that plant, on stalks of corn, ears of corn, either 1 or 2 ears of corn on that plant are going to be within about 6 to 12 inches on every stalk on that plant, okay? So we've bred those plants to be the same height, we've bred them to have the reproductive parts in the same place, and we've got it down to a fine science because we've been doing it for so long. We're in our 3rd year on industrial hemp. And if you plant a variety of hemp, if you've got a grain variety, you might have some plants this tall, you might have some plants this tall, you might have some plants this tall. So we've got a tremendous amount of work to do in these areas to get that plant more uniform in the field, which will help us a great deal. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in 2017. A lot of them are the same, but we do have some different things. We're going to be looking at some no-till work this year. We're going to be looking at that following some alfalfa and some wheat and some tall fescue. Again, Dr. Snell and Tyler Mark and them are doing a lot of work on the economics of this, which we're excited about, some more herbicide tolerance. But again, just to tell you that work is ongoing. Dr. Ben Goff has looked at hemp as a forage. We continue to look at that. Again, we have to be very cognizant of the fact of the THC if we're looking at hemp as a forage. He did some work this past year on crude protein, and you can see, oh, I'm not getting this, here we go, that on this particular variety, these are 2 hemp varieties, but this one, we had crude protein that might be equal to alfalfa, 20% crude protein, NDF and ADF, very, very good, and a relative feed value is very good there as well. So he's excited about that, we're excited about that. We think there's some opportunity there. Look at this, we'll go through it real quick. This would be the same if you were looking at alfalfa or red clover or even orchard grass or something. Days after planting, crude protein. Basically, when we start out, that crude protein is up, but it tends to go down. Different planting dates right here. We're looking at grain varieties, dual purpose fiber, and then we actually had some canaf in there. So I'll just show you this to show you that this work is ongoing. Dr. Goff is going to continue that as we go through. Won't spend a lot of time on this. I do want to touch on this a little bit. I can't tell you what the varieties are, but we had 26 pounds of seed. This was done last year. And we looked at these varieties, and hemp seed varies quite a bit in size. So if you have a low population count or large seed, so it's kind of inverse, large seed, on some varieties you may only have close to 20,000 seed per pound. But if you get a smaller variety, a smaller seed which have a high amount of seed per pound, it can be almost 3 times different. So when we talk about seeding rates per acre, when we talk about 20 pounds for grain or 40 pounds for dual purpose or 60 pounds for fiber, are we talking about the same variety? What if we plant the same variety? What if we plant this variety for grain at 20 pounds versus this variety for grain? Huge difference. So again, just some stuff that we're working on. Absolutely, positively could not do without our cooperators. Again, as Brent mentioned, we really don't have any financial support, and we don't have any grants from USDA. The Kentucky State Legislature is not to say, hey, here's $1 million, go research industrial hemp. And again, we've probably left some off here, but these are some of the folks that have helped us tremendously. Again, opportunities for processing and all. This is Doris Hamilton. She heads up the industrial hemp program there with Brent at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. I cannot reiterate enough that if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have a program. This is some of the work that Patrick and group were doing out at the farm this past year. Again, you can drill it in the seed. You can use transplants, much like you would tobacco. We did some harvest back this past summer. Tom's out there examining the material that we had there. You can do fiber round bales, mid-sized square bales. We ran some through a disc bind and a crimper. This is the crimp material. This is just behind a sickle bar mower. You can see our plots from the air there. This is hemp. The lighter material is canaf. Interesting thing about cutting this with a sickle bar versus this, we crimped it. This was in July. And if you remember, in July we had a tremendous amount of rain, and what happened was, because we crimped this and turned it, we left a lot of that hurd out in the field. We did harvest some seed. Seed harvest is very precarious. Again, the hemp flower, very productive, very prolific, but the seed matures from the bottom of that flower up. And by the time the seed at the top of the floret is mature, the seed at the bottom is already shattering and dropping off, or the birds are getting it, okay? So when you harvest that seed, chances are you're going to have some shatter here on the ground. Chances are there's going to be a lot of green material. And if you put it in a grain bin or something, you better get air on it immediately. And I mean immediately. Don't stop, don't collect 200 and go, pass go. Put air on it, mix it, or you'll get some of this mold like we got. No insects bother it. Well, there are some insects out there. You can see some woolly worms and all. I'm not an entomologist, but you can see cutworms there and all. These are just some things that we saw in the field. It will sprout in the seed head, much like wheat or corn will, if you get the right conditions. This was in July of 2016, so there are some issues. Again, this is our baleage that we baled up. Nick, I think that's Nick driving the tractor right there. Thanks to him and Fayette County for loaning us the machine there. Greatly appreciate that. This was something that was done in Lexington back in the summer. Annie Rouse with the Kentucky Hemp Research Foundation and her group worked on this. They had a hemp food cook-off in downtown Lexington, and they had local restaurateurs come in and make different things with hemp. They had hemp pizza, they had hemp ice cream, they had hemp cookies, they had all kinds of different things there. But the thing I liked about it the best is they had a lot of posters there talking about the benefits and the markets, nutrition and all like that. So it was an educational thing as well as something like a tasting. So I think those things are very, very important to go along with that. Again, what are some of our challenges that face us? This is a big one, but again, lack of understanding. We're just now starting this, okay? When we talk about tobacco, we talk about corn, people have a pretty good understanding of what we're talking about, and they're not going in at square one. A lot of people coming on board with industrial hemp are coming in at square one, and so getting that information to them is very important. Lots of work to be done on that germplasm and all. We talked about that. This is me personally, some things that I think that we need to continue to focus on and look at in the future. Brent talked about all the regulations and paperwork that are involved with this program, and it is cumbersome to say the least. But in my opinion, if we did not have that program, we would have a total mess. If the federal government just opened up and said everybody can grow hemp, it would just be a free-for-all. It would just, because we're starting at square one, it would just be chaos. So I think we need to continue this program. The information, the data that we're garnering from this, if and when the federal government says they're not going to regulate it, we're going to be way ahead of the game. So I think that's very important. Plant breeding, I mentioned that. We've got to get a tremendous amount of work done on that. Hopefully pesticides will be allowed here before too awful long. Harvesting and storage, very important. I mentioned about the seed. If you're going to do fiber, you got to have, it's a lot of bulk. You got to have space to store that and all. So lots of work to do there. Economics, I probably could just get rid of all the rest of them and just leave that one there. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't put money in your back pocket, then it's not going to work for us, okay? Now we can't look at and say that right now because we're still just researching all this. We're only in our third year. Really, if you look at it, I don't count the first year, 33 acres. I kind of just dismiss that. 15, 16, 17 coming up. We're just in our third year, okay? So I don't think we're there where we're going to be. That's down the road. But when we get down the road, and I don't know if that's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, it's got to make money or it's just not going to work. Very hard to get financial backing because we can't get crop insurance. Again, it's an illegal crop if you're not growing it in the pilot program, so very hard to get that financial backing. And then I think this is a very, very important thing, is the contracts between the farmers and the processors. They're not perfect. They're going to continue to evolve. But there needs to be something there to help alleviate some risk on either side if we can. And I don't know if we're close to that. Will, how close are we to having a perfect contract between growers and processors right now? 10 to 20 years, okay. But again, I think those are some of the important things that we've got to do.